Good Tuesday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and thank you kindly for joining us on the Jerry and Jerry Show. It's that beautiful time of year where football and basketball intersect. A lot we're going to talk about on today's program, including Tony Elliott's football program heading to Pittsburgh, where they are a 7.5-point favorite. Let's cut to the chase. This football team is on the skids right now, and it's looking to turn the corner and maybe secure some bowl eligibility. Some of the naysayers predict the football team will finish on a 7-game losing streak. They head to a stadium and they head to an environment where the last time UVA won a game, Al Groh was on the sidelines and Dave Weinstein was on the sidelines for the Pitt Panthers. We'll talk Virginia football, we'll talk quarterback play and what the Wahoos have to do coming out of the bye week. Before we do that, however, we have a guest on the line courtesy of the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, Jerry Hootie Ratcliffe, the star of our program, a name that you know, a household name. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Jones on the line. Judah Wickhauer behind the camera will patch Coach Jones into the program and pass the baton to a man that also needs no introduction, a Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, and Jerry Hootie Ratcliffe.
Well, it's my pleasure to have an old friend, Jeff Jones, on our program today. And I said when he retired that he was my favorite coach to work with in my career, and that spans a whole lot of coaches at a whole lot of places. And Jeff was always just such an easy guy to work with for the media, and so transparent and candid and cooperative and understood where the media was coming from. And I want to thank him for that, for all of us media types that ever dealt with him at all the universities he coached at. And you were talking about it having the Midas touch. When Jeff retired from ODU not long ago, with 560 wins under his belt, he was the 19th winningest active coach in the country. That's out of 300, way over 300 schools, and 32 years, just an incredible career. Jeff, thank you so much for taking some time to join us this morning.
Well, I appreciate it. It was, I was glad to get your, when you reached out yesterday, I'm glad it worked out. It took me a little bit to figure out how to get Skype up here, but
you're still ahead of me.
A while since it's been a while since I had used it, but I think it's working fine. But really enjoyed being with you guys this morning.
Let's go back to a little bit before we start talking about today's issues and how they've screwed up college sports. But I want to go back to when you were in Owensboro, Kentucky, and I still think that was one of the major recruiting coups of all time when Terry Holland got you and Jeff Lamp and Lee Raker all out of the Bluegrass State to come east and play for Virginia. How in the world did he do that?
I think the easiest way to say it is, for me anyway, is he had gotten Lamp and Raker, and Richard Schmidt was already there. Richard was an assistant coach at UVA, but had been Lamp and Raker's high school coach. And then there was Terry Gates along with those other two guys. They were all high school teammates. I didn't know those guys, but I was familiar with them, and I think ultimately that's kind of what swayed things and got me to Charlottesville rather than Chapel Hill.
You guys rewrote Virginia history for sure. Put Virginia basketball back on the map and made it pertinent. And certainly it didn't hurt when the big guy came to town. What was people often ask me what it was like to cover those teams, and I tell them it was kind of like covering the Beatles because everybody wanted a piece of you guys. You were so successful in a national brand at that point. What was it like to be a player on those teams, Jeff? And you were one of the leaders and one of the best point guards in UVA history. What was it like being part of that?
Well, my first year at UVA before Ralph came was for me, really frustrating. We lost more games that year, and I think we won 20 games maybe that season, 18 or 20, something like that. Went to the NIT. We lost more games that year than I lost collectively in high school for multiple years. So that was different. That was hard. But then when Ralph came, immediately the expectations just jumped out of the roof. And that first year we had some success, but those expectations, that was a challenge. And fortunately for us, we kind of put it together. We didn't make the NCAA tournament back then. I think it was 48 teams. We won the NIT, and that was the springboard, I think, for the following year. That next year, when in 81 was when Raker and Lamp Gates were seniors. I was third year. Ralph was second year. That was a great team, and that's kind of what you're talking about, the Beatles. That's when we were in the top two, maybe the top three in the country the entire year, and people just in the Charlottesville area, all the Virginia fans just really rallied around the team. That was I think that was when UVA first realized that nationally. That we could do something really, really special. It was a lot of fun. It was really cool. Number one, good guys, great friends that I still stay in touch with today. We were winning games. We were playing on national TV. And, we'd come home after a big win at North Carolina or, wherever. And we'd fly in to the little private runway right next to the Charlottesville airport. And there'd be 1,000 fans there waiting for us.
Awesome.
That was pretty heady stuff for a kid a naive kid from Owensboro, Kentucky. So, that was a lot of fun. But as I look back now, the wins, the rankings, all that was great. But those relationships, that's what really, really matters the most, and certainly what I value the most.
I'll tell you what, your team's coach always prepared. My dad went to UVA. I went to UVA. My brother went to UVA. Would love nothing more if our two sons went to UVA. No pressure on the boys. They're 6 years old and they're 2 years old. They got a little ways to go. But watching as a diehard sports fan, your team's always prepared. Your team's always tough. Your team's always played both sides of the floor. I'll throw you an open-ended question. You can go in so many ways with this one. What do you make of college basketball today, Coach? We had a point guard, a 6'7" transfer from Florida State that came to the University of Virginia and faced a little bit of adversity when it came to playing time, and he transferred from the program before playing a single minute for the Virginia men's basketball team. Anywhere you want to go on this topic, Coach?
Well, when Warley decided to transfer, I don't think you can single that out, because if you want to say things have changed, for a coach to resign 2 weeks before the season, that's even bigger change to me. So, there's all kinds of things, and I don't, just like I understand. I don't fault Tony. I mean, the timing was awful. It was terrible, especially for those kids. It's bad for the program, but for those kids, when you have a chance to play for a coach, a Hall of Fame coach, and you go there, and yes, Virginia's an amazing, fantastic school. It's an ACC program, but one of the, if not the biggest thing that those kids went there for was to play for Tony Bennett. So that's a big blow to them. So I don't blame anybody for maybe having second thoughts when after he retired. But the game. Let's before we get to the game, the coaching profession has evolved so much. Back in 1983 was my first year coaching. I had been with Golden State, and I ultimately was let go after being injured and then coming off injured reserve and all that. I came back in December to join the staff. I was very, very fortunate that Coach Holland had saved me a spot, and had been in coaching for 42 years after that. From that point to now, it's like night and day. The composition of coaching staffs, the money, the recruiting calendar. I mean, everything is different. Within the last, certainly the last 5 years, but I'm going to say the last 3 years, the landscape has changed as much in the last 3 years it did in all those previous 30 whatever years, 39 years, I guess. It's never been an easy profession. It was a great profession, but it was never an easy profession. Now it's unbelievably hard on those guys. The toll, mentally, emotionally, physically. Basketball was already the longest sport in season sport. It spans 2 semesters. None of the other sports do what basketball does. But now the season ends, and even before the season ends, for the teams that go far in the NCAA tournament, the transfer portal opens up, and then you start with that, and then at the same time, somehow or another, you're trying to recruit for the juniors and the following class. It used to be there was a little bit of time that you would have, maybe just a couple days, but in April there was a dead period. In May you might have a few days, and then in June you'd have a week off. Those don't exist anymore. The only time that coaches have off is a 1 week period in August. Now, if the skeptics want to say, well, coaches are paid a hell of a lot more. Well, they are, but that doesn't dismiss or discount, the toll that it takes on them physically, mentally, emotionally, and the toll that it takes on the family. So that has changed. The game itself has changed. It's changed stylistically with the 3-point shot, with the shot clock, with analytics. There's much more emphasis on the 3-point shot, both offensively and defensively. You can't overlook analytics. Everybody associates with analytics. Well, you got to shoot the 3. Well, that's true. You've got to, but you also have to defend the 3. You got to make decisions based on personnel. Are you going to give up and play one-on-one in the post and let somebody shoot 60% one-on-one? Down there in the post, or you've got to come up with ways to counteract the style of play these days. So, in answer to your question, everything has changed. It is much more, and I can't believe that people have argued this, and I've seen it online, and it's people are being they're just being dishonest with themselves and anybody else. It's transactional now. That doesn't mean you can't have a relationship, but the relationships are different because they're formed. It's almost like speed dating, right? You don't have the time to go through, a year or 2 years of recruiting, phone calls, home visits, school visits, official visits. And so you don't know the kids as well. They don't know you as well. Trust is something Coach Holland used to tell us. It's not something that you take on and off like a coat. It's something that day after day after day after day, with both parties, working together, is built over time. Well, you don't have that time anymore, so trust oftentimes is lacking in these relationships. David Teal wrote an article, Jerry, back in the summer. He came. I invited him. He came and joined about 50. Of us with Virginia basketball
Yes.
Ties and background at my house, and it wasn't a one-time thing. It's something that happens pretty much every year, with the exception of during COVID. And players that I coached, players that I played with, former assistant coaches, managers, whatever, got together. That kind of thing won't happen, in 10, 15, 20 years, because nobody, there's not these big groups that have that bond the way programs have had in the past. So it has changed, it's evolved, and it is what it is. I'm not going to argue and say, well, it should be like it used to be. No, it's not. That was great, and this this is the new reality. I think you see a lot of coaches, not only in basketball, but in football and other sports, that are the older coaches are getting out, and just because whether Roy or Kay or Jay Wright or Tony Bennett or just because those guys get out and maybe they didn't like it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different. And I respect the coaches' decisions to do what's best for them. But the players are going to do what's best for them. Do I like it? No, but no, whether I like it or not isn't really relevant. And so this new younger breed of coaches, the coaches that are better equipped to adjust and kind of go with the new environment, more power to them. And they've got to deal with they've got general managers now. They're going to have what essentially are capologists to deal with the salary cap, because that kind of thing is probably what's coming. Collective bargaining, how can you have collective bargaining without the players unionizing? Maybe it can happen. My knowledge of antitrust and all that kind of stuff isn't the best, but there's so many different things other than how to defend a pick and roll or how we're going to attack the Syracuse zone.
Can I ask him a follow-up question?
Sure.
Yeah, follow-up question for you. We talked about this on previous shows, Coach Jones. This is coming up on the show right now. Do you think the short notice with the retirement from Coach Bennett was strategic at all, so Coach Sanchez had a shot at the interim post? If the retirement happened at the end of this past season, we know a national search would have happened, and perhaps Coach Sanchez would not have had a shot, at least for a year, to earn the full-time gig. Your thoughts on that topic?
I have no idea. I mean, could you argue that case? It sure seems like that would have been. But, the only two people that I know that could answer that question truthfully, and they probably wouldn't answer that question, is Tony and Ron. I know for a fact that Jason Williford had absolutely, and the rest of the staff had absolutely no previous knowledge of what was going to happen. But I don't like to speculate. They, meaning Ron and Tony, would have to be the people that would do it. I think it's absolutely safe to say, had it happened last spring, that Ron or Jason or anybody else wouldn't have had any shot. So you can make a case for that, but who knows? That they're probably gonna they're gonna take that secret to their grave, I would guess.
It's a little bit of a different circumstance in that he was named the coach just not long before the season starts. You were in somewhat of a similar role in the fact that but Terry announced he was going to leave
right at the end of
the year. Virginia had a national search, and Terry ended up suggesting that you take over the program. And what kind of pressure did you feel? And I know it's a little different than Ron since he's been a head coach before, but what was that like for you? All of a sudden, you're in there with the heavyweights, Krzyzewski, Dean Smith, Gary Williams, etc. And a lot of people were saying, I think at that point you were the youngest coach and head coach in the United States.
Well, no, I wasn't the youngest head coach in the United States. As the coach at Niagara, Jack Armstrong, maybe was his name. He made sure to remind me that he was younger than me. But I was 29 years old. I was the youngest head coach in the history of the ACC.
29. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Right. I was probably too dumb, too naive to think too much about it. I was excited. You know, it was my school. It was, you know, my program, my home, and I got to lead it. So I was, you know, tickled to death. And, you know, whatever salary that Jim Copeland offered me, I was going to say yes. He could have said, I'll pay you $20, you know, a month, and I would have taken it. But, you know, to get from Coach Holland, we went running, and he gave me a heads up, you know, of what was going to happen. And we went running, and he told me in the parking lot outside of University Hall, and he said, you know, I can't take this anymore. I can't sit in my office, and this might be a quote that's never been shared publicly, and look at that building while they neglect men's basketball anymore. And I'm gonna retire. I'm gonna sit. That building was the McHugh Center, by the way, for those of you who don't know. You know, he had just had enough, and so, you know, I mean, of course, I accepted it. A couple days later, he announced it. Then, as the season went on, if I recall, we had a pretty good run there, you know, I think Pete Gillen, Rick Barnes, and Mike Montgomery were the three guys that they were really targeting. Yep. Pete Gillen's AD, I think, refused to allow Jim Copeland to speak to Pete. Rick Barnes came down, and he was third, I guess. Rick Barnes came down and turned it down. Mike Montgomery visited during the Final Four. And that year, the Final Four was in Denver. And I was out at the Final Four. You know, that's where the NABC Coaches Convention, you know, goes on, is at the Final Four. So I got a call from Jim Copeland saying, you need to come back here. You know, they would have liked for them to keep me, but they weren't going to make anybody do it. But so I came back and met with Mike Montgomery, and I kind of just assumed he was going to be the coach because he gave me a recruiting assignment he wanted names, and he wanted them like yesterday. He wanted names of any 6'10" or taller players that had a 3.0 GPA in the country. So I'm going to work during that Final Four weekend. And then, you know, Montgomery gets mad because they don't offer him the job before he leaves. So he goes back and ends up signing an extension, gets a big raise and an extension at Stanford. So then that left Rick Barnes. Rick Barnes came in, you know, accepted the job. Coach Holland told us that day that, you know, Barnes accepted the job and was not going to retain any of us on the staff. I remember, you know, saying, well, shoot, I don't know what's going on. You know, I'm going to go to an AAU practice in Richmond. I went to watch the AAU practice. And so back then, you guys, you know, there were no cell phones. So, you know, I was kind of out of pocket. I get to the AAU practice, Tony Squire's AAU program, and Dick Tarrant, who was the coach at Richmond at the time, said, you know, I'm sure you heard all, you know, all about the stuff at UVA. And I was like, yeah, Barnes took it and he's not keeping anybody. And he's like, oh, no, you haven't heard? And I said, no, I've been in the car. I've been driving. He said, he called back when he got to Providence and turned the job down. So I was like, oh, hell, what's going on? Actually, it might not have been hell that went through my mind. But so I immediately leave the AAU practice and go back to my house. At that time, I was actually I had an apartment in Charlottesville, but we lived in Goochland, in between Charlottesville and Richmond, and you know the old-fashioned voice recorders, voicemail things. Mm-hmm. I had 30-some, and then you know just it was completely full, and it was reporters, it was all these people. So one of them was from Jim Copeland, and Jim called me up, and we had a meeting the next day, and then had a formal interview later that week. and then that was right about the time the men's basketball banquet, the postseason banquet. And I apologize if I'm reminiscing
This
or
is
rambling
great.
on.
No,
this is great.
Probably
Some good stuff.
Information that. So I walk into University Hall, into that main entrance right there in that lobby, before going down to the court where they hold the banquet. And Copeland's the first guy that comes over, and he's kind of smiling. And you'd have to know Jim, but sometimes he'd get the fake grin and kind of talk out of the side of his mouth.
Yep.
But we were walking in, he says, "You still want the job?" And I looked at him, I was like, yeah, hell yeah. And he said, "Okay, well, it's yours, but you can't tell anybody. You can't say anything tonight." So I don't think I paid attention to anything that was said or done at that banquet that night. That's kind of how it happened. And as I said, I was honored. I was thrilled. I was so excited to be able to lead the basketball program that I had been a part of at that point for 12 years, and at the school that I loved, and all that kind of thing. So it was it was really, really special. Didn't end exactly as I would have liked for it to, but it was a great experience.
Well, as a reporter back then, I was all over that story, and I actually was making a nuisance of myself. I was roaming around University Hall every day, just trying to snoop and find out things. I ran right into Jim Copeland and Mike Montgomery walking out of the back door, and which was kind of awkward. And Copeland introduced me to Montgomery, and I asked questions, but obviously he wasn't going to answer them. And then the Rick Barnes thing, they actually flew the old Whirl, I think, airplane, my employers, back to Providence, and Barnes said he had to check it out with the Friars and their AD, and Copeland waited at the airport, and Barnes never came back. So he was left sitting there.
The person he had to check it out with was Dave
Gavitt, yes.
And Dave Gavitt said, "That's not happening."
Right.
Basically, he put his foot down, and that was that.
Yeah.
So,
but that was an interesting time period for sure. And
Want to hear something crazy? This was 34 years ago. That puts it in perspective. 34 years ago, you were walking around grounds, McHugh Center.
Yep.
This man's 29 years old, getting a break of a lifetime professionally. I mean, just think about it. 34 years ago, Hootie.
Yeah, it doesn't seem 34 years ago, but it certainly was an incredible time period. And I know things, like you said, Jeff, didn't end the way you wanted to, but I remember I was the first guy to look it up because you got off to such a great start after 3 or 4 years. I looked it up, and your start at Virginia was better than Krzyzewski's start at Duke over that same period of time. Dean Smith started at Carolina, and Gary Williams started at Maryland. So you opened it up with a bang, no question about it.
Yeah, I think I saw somewhere that Roy Williams got off to a faster start than I did. I just saw a headline somewhere that said that. But that's what happens when you've got good players and good people around you.
Well, one of my great memories was covering that 95 team that was a hairbreadth from getting to the Final Four, losing to Nolan Richardson's 40 Minutes of Hell Arkansas team. And I know you guys just kind of ran out of gas.
You beat Roy Williams that year.
Beat Roy Williams on his
beat Kansas that year.
On his turf in Kansas City.
Yeah.
I'll never forget Tom Perrin coming into the press room after the game, which coaches normally don't do, and whispered in my ear. He said, "Did Roy cry in the press conference?" So anyway, that was an incredible run that season, and I know you said you have a special relationship with that '95 team. You guys have had some reunions as well.
Yeah, the reunions span a bunch of different years, but that group is right in the center of it with Corey and Junior and Jason and Norm and Curtis and all those guys. But it's also fun because this Terry Gates will come back, Dan Merrifield, Tim Mullen, Jimmy Miller, Ricky Stokes. To get a little bit of a more mature flavor, if you will.
Right. There's nothing wrong with that. That '95 team was pretty darn good. I know that I think that recruiting class of those guys was the number 2 recruiting class in the nation behind the Fab Four at Michigan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's accurate.
How did you put that class together?
A whole lot of hard work and probably some luck, And back then, you only had 2 assistant coaches that were involved in the off-campus recruiting. That was Dennis Wolf and Brian Ellerby, and both of those guys did an amazing job. And Brian was the guy that kind of bird-dogged Corey Alexander. Corey made us work. I mean, he laughs about it now. He's like, yeah, I knew I was coming at, such and such a time, but I was going to make you guys work all the way till the very, very, very end. And we had to hold off Arizona. And, Corey's school was probably Georgia Tech, but Georgia Tech signed Travis Best. So, that worked in our favor. But, Junior Burrow was a guy down at Oak Hill, and Dennis Wolf, really befriended Steve Smith, the longtime, great coach down at Oak Hill, and recruited Junior, and got to know Junior's dad, who Thomas Senior, who's a great character, and I had known Jason Williford's father and mother, but I had been recruiting Jason Williford since he had been a freshman in high school, and Jay. At one point, Jay was thinking about visiting Boston College, and I had to call up his dad, and I was like, Larry, that can't happen. So we had that one wrapped up, and big Chris Alexander, again, one of the best defenders in ACC history. Now, he didn't, because of how we played defense, he didn't get any of the great accolades. But, that defensive award, I don't know how it is in the ACC anymore, but all these Duke guys got the Defensive Player of the Year, and a couple of, they had stats, they got promoted and everything. The media promoted them, but Chris Alexander, I'm just saying, Chris Alexander was an amazing defender. Chris Alexander, we beat obviously a very good Wake Forest team, Tim Duncan's senior year, and our strategy was, because Duncan in college was never a big scorer. I don't think up going into his senior year, I don't know that he had ever had more than 21, 22 points. But where he was so good was when you doubled him, he would kick the ball out, and they had, guys like Ricky Peral and Randolph Childress and, Mark something, he's an actor now. They had all these really good shooters. And he made those guys better. So we said, okay, we're going to play Chris one-on-one. And, unlike Ralph Sampson in college, Duncan did not just take over and dominate the game and go for 30 or 40 when you played him one-on-one. And he had maybe good games, but we were able to guard him with one guy. Those other guys weren't nearly as good. And after we did it, everybody else in the ACC started trying to guard him that way.
That was a hell of a team, that Wake Forest team. I think Tony Rutland was on that team.
Tony Rutland.
Yeah.
Another great
Hampton
shooter.
Roads product, Tony Rutland.
Yeah. The other guy in that recruiting class, and I got to say this because he'd be mad at me if he found out, was Yuri Barnes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Yuri.
Yuri had a terrific career for us also.
Let's throw this to you here. You're just a good guy, man. I love hearing the stories. I love watching you coach. I followed your career post University of Virginia as well. And you got a lot of questions coming in from the viewers and listeners. We'll get to the viewers and listeners' questions in a matter of moments. I just want to get your crystal ball prediction of what you think is going to happen to college basketball. You've kind of touched on it a little bit with, we're going to have to cap some of the NIL money that's going out there because it's clearly creating an unfair advantage. And one of the reasons we all love college football and college basketball, I mean, I'm a diehard college basketball fan, just like you guys, diehard college football fan, is because anything can happen. But if the blue bloods and these big-time programs have way more money to offer than other schools that either don't have the money or refuse to get in the game, we're going to lack parity. And we're going to lack competitiveness, and it's going to become a top-heavy sport. I'm just curious of what you, the pro, Coach Jones, thinks is going to happen from the NIL money, from the transfer portal, and any other crystal ball predictions you see happening.
Well, I'm going to start off answering your question with a question, and that's, when has there been parity in college basketball?
Good point.
That's fair.
Right? There has always been haves and haves a little bit, and then the have-nots. The difference now is the gaps are greater, right? And the NIL exacerbates it because that money's going to the players, right? But when you look. And I don't mind. I hope you guys don't mind if I get on my soapbox. But when you look at college basketball programs, and some of these high majors, they think the answer is to throw money at this thing, and that they're paying 20 guys to be on staff, right? And they're flying first class. They're flying the charters and the training tables and the beautiful facilities and all that kind of stuff, which, okay, that's great. But everybody's doing it. When you've got that much of an advantage, over the mid-majors and the low majors, why do the schools that are mediocre in the Power 5 conferences get the nod over teams that actually really, really accomplished so much more given their situation to go to the NCAA tournament, right? The NCAA tournament has become filled with mediocre programs from Power 5 conferences. That's the biggest thing. And I know that, the argument is, well, if we put them in this conference or if we move to that may be the case. I mean, but we don't know. I'd much rather have, a mid-major team like Indiana State, and the Virginia people are going to get mad at me. I would have much rather seen Indiana State in the NCAA tournament last year than UVA. And UVA laid an egg. They were awful. Yeah. Indiana State did something, given their resources, that was remarkable last year. And that's just one example. But, I don't know. I don't like where college basketball is going. One thing in college athletics, I think almost has to happen. I don't know what it'll look like, but you almost have to. Football's already taken their national championship, and they've moved that to the side, right? That's not under the NCAA umbrella. Why not just take football, right? Because their numbers and everything is so different. And football's, Charlottesville, you guys have a lot of kudzu. You know what kudzu is?
Tell us, Coach Jones.
It's that plant. It grows everywhere, right? It's beautiful. It's like ivy. Yeah. It's beautiful, but it just overwhelms everything. It smothers everything. The trees and everything else. That's college football. So just take that and move it to the side. Let it be its own entity. And then, maybe with basketball and then the Olympic sports, maybe then we can get back to more geographically based conferences, so you're not traveling all over the place, and try to figure out, some distribution of the NCAA tournament dollars and all that kind of thing. The House settlement, there's still a lot of stuff they've got to work out there. I mean, I know the NCAA is hopeful that that's going to happen, but there's a lot of hurdles there. So I don't know what's going to happen, but there does need to be something. Maybe it's not a hard salary cap. It's something that way. But how do you deal with Title IX? Right? I mean, if you can't ignore it. I mean, it's law. Title IX is law. So you got to figure out how that, and it's almost impossible to be Title IX compliant with football in there if they're getting, what did Ohio State spend this year? 20 something $million
Yes.
this year alone on NIL.
Yeah.
And
they're going to spend more.
And they're not the only ones, but I think they're at the top end of that.
I mean, Alabama for their recruits, we talked about this. They had a row of luxury automobiles.
That was Texas.
Oh, that was Texas.
Yeah.
A row of luxury automobiles.
Lamborghinis.
That the players could drive. I mean, how do you compete with that? I mean, that's absolutely insane here. I'll throw questions are coming in quickly for Coach.
Yeah, keep throwing
this question's from Charlotte. Does Coach Jones think the March Madness field should be expanded to include more programs? Jerry, I'm curious of his opinion as coach of American and ODU. The mid-majors, as he's highlighted, deserve to get in the dance, and they're being overlooked.
Well, so if you told me that we could expand it, to 72, 76, whatever, and there would be more mid-major programs in there, I'd say yes. I'd say hell yes. That's not what would happen, right? The Power Five, the SEC, Greg Sankey down there, the commissioner of the SEC, they're already getting in line that if it expands, they want more Power Five schools. They want 10, 11, 12 schools from the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12. So I would say no. I don't want it to expand because I could care less about more mediocre Power Five teams getting in there. The schools, as teams move around conferences, they're making their decision. We're going to go into this conference knowing that conference is really, really tough. And they're making the decision because they're going to get more. They're going to get more resources, more money, more exposure, more of everything. So as part of that decision to go into those conferences, they should also accept some responsibility that, okay, if we're making this move, it's going to be harder, not easier. It's going to be harder to get to the NCAA tournament.
What about opening? There's been a suggestion that just open up to everybody, every Division I school, and just make it a true national tournament. Good or bad idea?
It seems too complicated for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I got a Virginia degree, but I'm not smart enough to figure that out.
This question's coming for Coach Jones. This one is from South Carolina. Who's the best player he's ever coached, and who's the best player he's ever coached against?
The best player that's ever coached?
That best player that you have ever coached, and the best player that you have ever coached against.
Well, technically in 1983, I was on the coaching staff, right? So that would have to be Ralph Sampson, right? But as a head coach, Brian Stiff.
Not a bad choice.
Yeah. That I've coached. The best player that I ever coached against. Wow, I have to think about that. When you look at their entire career, you look back, including the NBA, it might have been Tim Duncan. He probably wouldn't have been in the top 10. He wouldn't have been in the top 5 for sure. Maybe not the top 10 of the best college players that I ever coached against. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's kind of like Michael Jordan. At Carolina.
Yeah. No, exactly. That's a great point, Jerry.
Well, Jordan did win a national championship.
I coached against Jordan as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. More questions coming in for Coach Jones. This is a good one, a local question for you. What's Jeff Jones's favorite place to eat at in Charlottesville from his playing days, his coaching days, and right now?
Wow. Well, the Aberdeen Barn has to be up there. We got so lucky. We got so lucky as players to eat pregame meal and other meals at the Aberdeen Barn. And back in the day, Terry Spathos, he spoiled us and everything. So
still there.
That definitely have to be up there. I understood, and it's been years since I've gone there, but Little John's on the corner was a pretty special place when I was playing. There were some late nights spent with Terry Gates and some of my other teammates rolling into Little John's, and then I think it went away and now it's come back. But that's definitely a kind of a tradition. That's a legendary place.
But a closing question for Coach.
Oh, wow. You're putting the pressure on me now.
And we should highlight Aberdeen Barn, a supporter of Jerry Ratcliffe.
Yeah, it's one of my sponsors, and so we appreciate that plug for sure.
Well, and Angela, Terry's sister, is running it now. She's awesome, and Derek is still there. Derek was a young guy way back when, but he's still working there, and Jimmy Rowe. Hey, we spent a lot of Jimmy Rowe was one of the servers. He was a huge basketball fan and a great guy, good friend. So as players especially, as I said, we were really lucky to go there.
Oh, as fans, we're really lucky to go there. Nothing like the cheese dip, nothing like the ramekins that come for the loaded baked potatoes, and the prime rib. I swear to God, it's the best prime rib I've ever had.
Yeah, that's awesome. The Spathos family, Jeff. You may not have known this, but they were honored a couple of weeks ago at a home game. They were given the Cross Saber Award from the Virginia Football Alumni Club. It's the highest honor that club gives. So that just shows you what an integral part of UVA athletics Aberdeen Barn's been over the decades.
I tell you what, the number of certainly men's basketball and probably football players that played at UVA that had a dinner at the Aberdeen Barn on their official visit. I mean, we're talking numbering in the hundreds.
Oh, absolutely.
Of easy.
That was one. You had 48 hours. One of the meals was going to be at Aberdeen Barn. So this is a really good. This is a really good commercial.
I know. I was going to say that. It's his sponsor over here. This is perfect, Coach Jones.
Maybe we'll get Jerry a free meal.
Absolutely. I guess the one thing I'm sure some of the viewers probably have this in the file, but are loaded up. But I guess a lot of people were pulling for you during your health issues. How's your health, and how's Danny?
So she's great. She's still working remotely with Axios, the publication up in DC, and enjoying that. My health is good. I feel great. I feel more mental clarity than I have in years. That only took me about I say about three weeks after the heart attack. And I was removed from the team, and like Wood Sealy, my AD here and really good friend, and Danae, they didn't allow me to to talk to the staff about basketball. They gave them orders. So if I'd ask questions, the guys on the staff would just ignore me. But about 3 weeks after the heart attack, my mental clarity was unbelievable because I didn't have all that stress and all that, everything. Your brain just doesn't rest during the season. That's continued, and then just physically, I'm trying to do, a lot of the things that I should have been doing for the last 30 years. But a lot of walking, eating healthier, and I feel great.
Well, you look great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Coach Jones, you were the absolute best. This has been a pleasure to chat with you. To the viewers and listeners who we did not get to their questions, we're mindful of Coach Jones's time. He just gave us 57 minutes of his most precious commodity today. You had, from what I counted, 11 different states watching you today, Coach Jones, on the Jerry and Jerry
Awesome.
Show. We look forward to doing this again in the future.
Absolutely. Just let me know. Maybe Jerry more than a day in advance.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry I put the pressure on you like that. But I know you're used to it.
Yeah. No, I'd love to be with you. It's brought back some great memories, and it doesn't surprise me that the show's doing so great. Jerry's a Hall of Famer, and kind of an institution, with the UVA and Charlottesville sports scene.
Been around for a while.
You have a good one, Coach.
That's one way of saying we're old.
Exactly.
We appreciate you.
Love you, brother.
All right, take care.
Take care.
All right. Jeff Jones, guys, absolutely fantastic. Judah, we'll stay here on this shot. I'll tell you what, a couple of items that came out in this interview, Hootie, that I need to highlight. And first, the interview was magical.
He's the best. I mean, you don't get any better than that.
He's absolutely magical. I think he broke some news in here multiple times here, or first time we've ever heard things multiple times.
Yeah, as close as I was to that coaching search, there was a couple things there that I didn't even know.
Right. So I'll let you unpack that. The first thing I want to highlight that I think is news is he said, for a fact, Jason Williford and the entire current UVA coaching staff had no idea about the retirement.
Yeah, and
Those were his exact words.
Yeah, and I think that clears up a lot of
right.
speculation out there about how choreographed everything was. But I think Tony truly did decide when he was away with Laurel down at the Tides Inn that he just, they say that all the coaches at some point in time they get hit. They just get hit with, I can't do this anymore.
Well, he did say this, and then I'll get out of your way. Williford and the staff didn't know about it. He did not know about Sanchez. Whether Sanchez knew the retirement was coming.
And like he said, they'll probably take that to
They'll take it to the grave. Right,
Yeah.
right. That was interesting to me.
It was interesting. And so that was good stuff.
And he knows Williford,
He's, like he said, he started
Right.
recruiting Jason when he was in the ninth grade.
Right. So he's known Williford since the ninth grade, Jay Willie since the ninth grade.
Yeah.
Other items that stood out to me from the interview, and you take it from there. The comment Terry Holland made about the McHugh Center and Virginia, the university, overlooking the men's basketball program and the need to retire immediately.
Well, I knew that. I was very close to Terry Holland and Ann, his wife, and Terry told me Terry was very upset that the university was doing nothing to enhance the basketball program, particularly University Hall, which was even at that point had outlived its purpose.
Right.
And when Ralph Sampson was here, and they could have sold out a 40,000-seat arena probably every night instead of a 10,000-seat arena, the demand for tickets was so incredible. And I don't know who it was at the time, but somebody in the university told Terry to hold off because they could have easily raised the money for a bigger arena at that point. The university told Terry to hold off that they would take care of that down the road. And they never addressed it.
They never did.
And that became Terry's passion when he came back as AD, is to get a new basketball arena. But he used to tell me in conversations, Jerry, they're killing the goose that laid the golden egg.
Yeah.
And I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
But even with that, I was shocked when he just suddenly said it was going to be his last year. I can't say I'm totally shocked, but I was surprised. And took the job at Davidson as the AD.
Right.
But, I wasn't surprised by that statement, because I knew that Terry was very
Disenchanted?
Pissed off, really.
Yeah.
That, it was enough to drive him out of the coaching profession, which was sad, because I think
He had a lot of runway left.
I think like George Welsh.
Yeah.
I think they both had runways left.
100%. 100%. One more thing from the interview. How about the timeline of Rick Barnes, Pete Gillen, Mike Montgomery, Jeff Jones, 29, head coach UVA? Anywhere you want to go with that? That was fascinating.
Yeah, that was some good stuff, because there were some things that he mentioned that I didn't know. I did know all about the Pete Gillen situation. I knew all about Montgomery. I knew he visited twice. And like I said, I bumped into him and Jim Copeland outside of University Hall and sort of forced my
You were a young man then.
I was.
Yeah.
And I kind of forced the issue. I was being aggressive as a reporter, but obviously they dodged all the questions I gave them. But I kind of thought at that point it would probably be Mike Montgomery, who was at Stanford at the time, for those people who don't know who Mike Montgomery is. But and then when he kind of got teed off that they didn't offer him the job, and Terry Holland had been, I think, pushing for Rick Barnes because they were close. Rick Barnes is from North Carolina, like Terry was. And
Would have been a hell of a hire.
yeah, I think Rick wanted to come back to the ACC, and eventually he did, to Clemson. But I think Terry pushed for that and convinced Copeland to go after Barnes. And like I said, I know Barnes spent most of the evening, late into the night, at Jim Copeland's office at University Hall. He accepted the job. Then he said, I've got to go back and tell my people at Providence. And he and Copeland got on the old, I was at the Daily Progress then, and the Daily Progress owner, Thomas Worrell, had a plane that he let the University of Virginia use for various things.
The Worrell family owned the Daily Progress.
Yeah, they got into the Worrell plane, flew back to Providence. Barnes told Copeland to wait at the airport, and he would come back, and they would fly back to Charlottesville for the announcement. Terry Holland told me afterwards that there was a major mistake by Copeland. He says, once you get somebody in your place and you get them to agree,
You don't let them leave.
you don't let them leave.
Till the contract is
That's
signed.
a cardinal sin.
Right.
But he did, and they went back, and Rick Barnes went back to Providence to tell Dave Gavitt, who was one of the most powerful men in college basketball, the AD. And as Jeff related, Gavitt said, that's not going to happen. And Barnes never came back to the airport. And so Copeland flew home alone. Copeland told me this. And so from that point, they were trying to figure out where to go. And I was talking to Terry one night about possibilities, and he told me, he says, what about Jeff? I said, well, what about Jeff? I said, he's awfully young. And he said, yeah, but he's never screwed up a program anywhere before. He's never been a head coach. He knows basketball. He's
He's a UVA guy.
He's a UVA guy.
Yeah.
People love him.
Right.
And so why not Jeff? And I totally agreed. And so that's where they went with that search, and the rest is history.
Unbelievable stuff. That was one of the best interviews we have done on the Jerry and Jerry Show. UVA basketball fans, watch the interview start to finish. Judah, we're going to go a little bit long today on the program at the 11:22 minute marker on Election Day. So 7 minutes over time. We got to talk football. It was a fantastic interview.
That was fun.
Pitt Panthers, 7.5-point favorites. Virginia hasn't won at Pittsburgh since Groh was on the sidelines and Dave Weinstein was on the sidelines with the Panthers. This is a football team, I can say very straightforwardly, that is reeling right now. What did Virginia need to focus on coming out of the bye week, and what do you make of this matchup against a top 25 team?
Well, hopefully they got their offensive line healed up, because that was a glaring fault against North Carolina when they gave up 10 sacks. And Anthony Calandria was running for his life most of the day.
Yeah.
So if they don't get that fixed, and again, it's all about healing, so you can't rush that sometimes. So who knows? Well, I guess we'll find out at Tony Elliott's press conference this afternoon of where that stands. But they had to, hopefully they got healed. And in the meantime, I guess they've just, again, I think we talked to Matt Schaub about this last week, that they had to self-scout again and focus on the things they do well, toss out the things that aren't working well, and go from there. And Pitt was undefeated going into SMU last weekend and got shellacked 48-25.
And Virginia's got SMU on the calendar.
Yeah. And it looks like now that SMU and Miami are on a collision course for the ACC championship game. Who saw that coming?
Right.
Clemson shocked by I still can't believe that they lost at home to Louisville. That was they're going to regret that for a long, long time.
That could sting Debo Sweeney come end of the year. Louisville climbs into the top 25. 5 teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference ranked in the top 25. Virginia still has Pittsburgh, SMU, Notre Dame, and Virginia Tech on the docket, and they're trying to avoid the 7-game losing streak. We talked to Matt Schaub, and I agreed with you, Hootie, and I want to give the man some props here. He said don't sleep on SMU in the summer and before the season started. He predicted that SMU was going to be a damn good football team, and look at where they are right now. You and Matt Schaub made the statement last week that Calandria is the guy. I agree with you 100%. The follow-up question to that is, if Calandria struggles out of the gate, will there be a quick hook with Elliott inserted into the ball game earlier than mop-up duty against the Pitt Panthers?
That's a good question, and I think that's a possibility. I think it depends on how slow out of the gate he might be, and if he's having problems because he's making mistakes as a decision maker, as opposed to
running for his life,
because that's out of his control. If he throws a couple of picks early, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a quick hook. And at that point, if it's his fault, if he's making bad decisions, otherwise I don't think so. If he's playing well and they're just having trouble moving the chains, I'm not sure that it'll make any difference.
Questions coming in for you before we get to them. Predictions with the Pittsburgh game, and then the rest of the schedule. What do you think is going to happen? Keys to victory for Virginia and some predictions.
Well, Pitt's number 23 in the country. They slipped 5 spots after that loss, and it'll be interesting to see, because in the past, sometimes when Pitt is out of the picture for a run at the title, even though we had division titles back then, they've kind of relaxed a little bit maybe and become a little more vulnerable. So it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back after their first defeat of the season, because they had a golden opportunity right there that it doesn't come easy. They didn't play well. They appeared unprepared. They were behind 21-3 before you could blink. The offense only scored 3 points the first 44 minutes of the game. Their quarterback, Eli Holstein, was pressured on 20 of his 57 dropbacks, even though SMU only blitzed 13 times, so they were getting to him through their offensive line. So Pitt has some vulnerabilities if Virginia can take advantage of it and attack.
But also some props. I watched that game. Some props to SMU.
SMU is a good football team.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for anybody to beat those guys.
Right. SMU looks like, guys, and SMU is on the schedule here. This is the question that's all over the feed here, is how do you stop a 7-game losing streak to close the season?
I think I won't say their only opportunity, but I think their best opportunity is probably this weekend, even though it's on the road and a place that they've only won once before.
I agree 100%.
And it's against a team that's going to be trying to bounce back.
Right.
The ACC game day, people are going to be there for that, so I'm not sure why. But
I'm not sure.
I don't know who makes that call, but and Virginia Tech, we thought they were getting better and better, and then they turned around and lost in overtime. Again, another close loss that they could have won, and it's awfully hard to say that Virginia has a much of a chance in Blacksburg because
the history
of the history.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look good for this football team. I don't know how they're going to avoid a 7-game losing streak to end the season. It's tough to say that, but it's hard to have any faith in a team that looked as bad as it did against Carolina a little more than a week ago.
I concur. If they finish with the victory somehow to close this season and get 5 wins, it's sad to say, but that is going to be a success for this club.
Absolutely.
5 wins is a success for this club. We'll close with this. News, notes, items out of the notebook, anything you want to cover. I'm curious of what's in the hopper on JerryRatcliffe.com at this hybrid time of year with basketball, a matchup against Campbell on the horizon, a football team that's fighting for their lives, a basketball team that's searching for an identity, a coaching staff that's looking to maintain its job under this interim tag and title. Will we see an up-tempo hoops team? Whose team is this? Is this McNeely's team? Is this TJ's team? Is it Day-Day's team? Is it Ron's team? I mean, so much to cover right now, Hootie.
I think it's McNeely's team. Ultimately, it's Ron Sanchez's team. But if you're talking about the guy who the players are going to follow, it's going to be McNeely. I think we will see some up-tempo. I don't know that much about Campbell. I haven't looked at them yet, but that's a game here tomorrow night to open the season.
Crazy.
I was driving back from Atlanta last night and listened to the parts of the Duke and Carolina games on my way home, but just about everybody in the ACC has opened up, and but we'll be having covering that game and focusing a lot on the Virginia Pitt game, a huge game for the Virginia football program. And everything Wahoo. And tough week for my family. We lost my ex-wife to a long fight with breast cancer this past week, and I wanted to acknowledge that and thank the people at the hospice house over on Park Street for their incredible caregiving that they gave her for her time there, and we'll miss her.
I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for Scott, and it's Amy.
Amy,
your daughter, your loss. Puts things into perspective, guys, at this time of presidential elections and struggling football teams and basketball teams searching for their identities. Hug those close to you guys, because life is certainly precious. Jerry Ratcliffe set up the interview with Jeff Jones. It was, frankly speaking, I've been in the media game for a long time, not as long as my colleague here, Jerry Ratcliffe, the best boss I ever had, but that was one of the best interviews I've ever been a part of.
That was a fun 50 minutes. We were only supposed to go 20 or 25.
And we went 58.
We could have gone 2 hours.
Easily gone 2 hours. And Jeff clearly was enjoying it.
I think he did. I think he did.
He clearly enjoyed it. JerryRatcliffe.com for anything orange and blue related. JerryRatcliffe.com. The man covers the athletic department and college sports better than anyone. JerryRatcliffe.com. Judah Wickhauer behind the camera. My name is Jerry Miller, and it's the Jerry and Jerry Show. Thank you kindly for joining us. So long, everybody. He's going to tell us when the mics are